What on earth are we doing on macOS? I don't know. I've just never done a code review on macOS before. So here we are, request for code review and feedback on my OpenGL project, which conveniently only works on macOS. I haven't started the actual code review yet, but my advice immediately is to make this work on more than just macOS, especially because OpenGL isn't even supported by macOS anymore. Before I share my OpenGL code for review, I want to tell you that I actually learned C++ from your playlist, and I've watched it more than a couple of times before I share my code for review. So this is now the fan mail series. This is now not the code review series. This is now the Cherno reads emails he gets. I knew this series would go downhill. No, but jokes aside, I'm glad that I helped you with C++. Always happy to hear from you guys. This is just some praise, I guess. I honestly thought I'd never be able to learn C++. I made the mistake of jumping into DSA too early without going deep into C++, then switched to JavaScript and React.js. What a curveball. What a twist in the story. I did not see that coming, only to drop those and return to C++ again. Welcome home. Now I'm focusing on understanding how the CPU and GPU work together, and honestly, I have to thank you for your C++ and OpenGL series. I've cleared 8 interviews out of 15, most of which were for 3+ years experience positions. Unfortunately, they are more concerned with experience rather than skill, but your videos have been a huge part of my learning journey. My advice would be apply to some better places. While working on this OpenGL project, I often argued with ChatGPT because my thought process and yours sometimes didn't match its suggestions, but that actually helped me learn even more deeply. So there's no escaping AI in general when it comes to programming. There are various different levels of AI usage, from vibe coding and just getting AI to write all of your code and not even checking what it does and just keep prompting it until you get some sort of result, I guess. Or there's just simply conversing with AI like you would with a mentor, like a real human mentor. Being like, hey, I'm thinking of this architecture and design for my engine or whatever I'm working on. Does that sound reasonable to you, Mr. AI? Or should I change something? What do you suggest? There's a whole spectrum. There's a whole AI spectrum. But I think that these days there's no way to avoid being somewhere on the spectrum. We're still talking about AI, by the way. So ultimately, I would say that using ChatGPT and arguing with it can in fact help you learn a lot more deeply. So far, this kind of level of AI usage I think is good. I should probably make a video talking about AI for people learning programming in general. However, we've seen a bunch of projects recently, really just this year, I think, that have potentially a suspiciously high AI involvement, which does make me think, am I just reviewing AI code? Am I just reviewing AI slop that people have sent me? But I don't know. I guess we're just gonna have to jump into the code and have a look. I am gonna keep my eye out for AI stuff though. All right, some more praise over here, and here is the repository. So this, as usual, I will have linked in the description below. And okay, so you've got a readme, which is fantastic. There's some information here about the requirements. So Mac OS with VS Code. We have to install the Xcode tool, that's pretty standard. Build and run steps are great. We've got some project structure. Okay. So let's talk about this readme, right? Yes, you have a readme. That's fantastic. Was this readme written by AI? Very, very high likelihood. Why? Because no one uses emojis like this, first of all. Like, this is wild. Having these like separators as well is a bit of a giveaway. Not to mention this. No human in the existence of the human race has done this for a readme of their repository on GitHub. Like, that is factual. That has not happened within the human race. Like, I'm just gonna say that. So already this is like, I'm a bit suspicious of this stuff. Again, it doesn't mean that the code was written by AI. I mean, I could imagine someone's like, I can't be bothered running a readme. Just like, do this for me, please. I don't really care about the readme. Just like put some content there so that people know what this is. I don't know why anyone would have to know what this is. But anyway, whether or not the actual code is AI does remain to be seen. So let's hold off for a little bit. AI, what do we do about AI? You know what they say, if you can't beat them, join them, because you don't want to fall behind. AI has been changing the way that developers write code for a while now, with lots of tools coming out that can greatly help developer productivity. Warp, the sponsor of this video, is something called an ADE, not IDE, but rather agentic development environment. An entirely new next generation workflow that uses AI to empower, not replace, devs. It all starts with a prompt. You just tell the agent what you want it to do. Now, since this is an entire development environment, Warp already understands your context. I can just write something like this and it will find the file and fix the problem for me. Warp uses the best models from OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google, so it often gets it right first try, like in this case. Oh, but AI is just going to replace me. Why would I use it? I think people get way too hung up on that. The reality is this lets you focus more on the architecture and design of your problem solving and less on the specific implementation details. AI coding tools, especially good ones, mean that developers can build more, faster, and focus on the problems that interest them. And quite frankly, the ones that deserve their attention. And Warp is great at that stuff. Aside from doing work for you, Warp is also really great for learning. I can ask it things like, how does shadow rendering work in any given code base? And it will find the relevant code for me and explain it to me, making it much easier for me to learn, especially from practical examples, which I think is really important. Or something you guys ask me all the time, what is the ref class in Hazel? Why does it exist? Integrating this kind of level of agent into your workflow can do wonders for your learning and productivity. Warp is already used by 700,000 developers with a 97% acceptance rate across 100 million code diffs. So what are you waiting for? Give Warp a try using my link in the description below. It's free. Go ahead and try it out. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Huge thank you to Warp for sponsoring this video. All right, I'm gonna jump into VS Code here in a minute, but I can just see from this repository, .ds store, right? These are like macOS Finder metadata files. They should not be checked in here at all. There is no git ignore here. There is no license here. I don't really care about the license, like whatever, but there should be a git ignore. DS store should never be committed. Keep an eye out for stuff like that. I mean, you could easily be like, ChatGPT bro, write me a git ignore for this repository or whatever. I mean, if you're using Warp, the sponsor of this video, then you could also just be like, write me a git ignore for this repository, because it would know everything that you have here and stuff that you'd probably want to ignore. Anyway, I don't think you need more encouragement to use AI, but in this case, probably wouldn't hurt. All right, here we are in VS Code. Now, if you got the C++ extension installed, you should be able to do Command-Shift-B in this case, and it's going to build it because we have like these tasks over here. Here it is, CPP build, blah, blah, blah. It will compile it over here using Clang and C++23. That did in fact work. Now running this for me, like start debugging, for example, didn't work. So it just opens a blank terminal over here and that's it. It thinks it's running. Yeah, I mean, it thinks it's running, but it is not running. So to run it, I'm just going to run the app through a terminal, and this is what we get. We get an OpenGL window. Here's ImGUI without the docking branch, so we can't drag windows out. We've got a demo window. We've got another window. We've got these object controls. We've got a very, very basic sort of OpenGL graphics application built using AI, potentially. I don't know. This rotation speed thing. All right, cool. Is the window resizable? Let me quickly check that out. No, it's not really. I mean, the ImGUI stuff worked, but I guess that's because you're just feeding in the window size to ImGUI and it takes care of the rest. But obviously the OpenGL viewport does not resize, so therefore these get stretched. And also if we move them out of here, no, I mean, they do stay on the screen, so they just get stretched. So the viewport, the OpenGL viewport is resizing, it looks like, but the camera projection matrix, or however you're rendering this, is clearly not taking into account the window size, which is why we're getting like this sort of distortion. All right, cool. Let's take a look at the code. That's what we're here for, right? And we're going to take a look at what is the first and most probably the last macOS code review I ever do. And for this code review, I'm specifically going to be keeping my eye out for AI. So int main with void. Okay, this I believe is probably not AI, but rather maybe copied from the GLFW website, unless AI is very literally referencing that. Oh, by the way, I had to add this line to get this to work in the first place. So if this isn't there and we're not declaring forward compatibility to be true, then my MacBook will just not create the window. The window creation will just fail. So I did have to add this. So GLFW is a C library, which is why when you look at the getting started page in their documentation, what you will see is int main void. This is a C thing. This is not a C++ thing. Would AI have picked up on that? I mean, probably, but the AI could just be like, look, this is the GLFW documentation. I'm going to take it from there. I don't know. This may or not be AI. Let's move on to the next line. So this opening curly bracket here, is it placed in the right spot? Does it look right? Does it look like AI? I'm not really sure. You guys let me know in the comment section below. Next line. So we're going to go line by line here. So next line, this comment. Is it a bit suspicious? Maybe. I mean, I haven't actually seen anyone write comments in quite this exact format before. It looks like you're just dividing different things here. I don't know why this is even in here. Maybe it should be in its own function, in its own class, whatever. A little bit suspicious here as well. Okay. So this little emoji character here is where things are starting to get more suspicious. And here's another emoji over here. Who programs with emojis? We have actually done a code review where I think variables were even, like C++ variables were emojis. I'll have that linked up there. That was wild. This is also wild. And again, I am suspicious. No one writing code would actually go to the effort of including emojis in this unless you're AI. So I don't know, man. Obviously, jokes aside, we're not going to start going line by line here, but this is suspicious. This is mostly just GLFW boilerplate code. You can see that every time the window resizes, we just are like, yeah, sure, GL viewport with height, which is weird. I mean, assuming that it's going to affect the swap chain, sure. And this usually comes from the actual, where is it? The GLFW poll events. So therefore it wouldn't probably affect some bound frame buffer. You have to be careful with OpenGL because it is a bit of a state machine global situation. So you have to be in the right context when you execute certain functions. But for this simple example, I mean, I guess it's fine. The viewport code does in fact work. I'm sure no frame buffers are even involved here anyway. Yeah, this stuff is fine. We are in C++ 23, so using like print, std print instead of cout for logging might be good, and that way we don't have to keep doing all this. We can just include print and then write a print line like that. Here we have our orthographic projection matrix, which is the problem of why things are becoming distorted. It's because we have a specific aspect ratio here, which is width divided by height. This is calculated before the while loop even starts. So this is done not dynamically like every frame, or it doesn't respond to our window resize events over here, which would have been another opportunity to do that. It's just statically defined before our main loop even starts running. So therefore it's going to be fixed. It's going to be constant to the aspect ratio at startup. Then also it looks like the shader is just bound. Like again, outside of the loop, the textures are just bound. The uniforms are just set once. So this happens once before our actual main loop starts running. We've got some very, yeah, I mean, all of this like code from this renderer, but then we got like R, like what is R? Float R. To me, that says it's like the red channel of a color, but sure, we've got increment move XA and XB. So we've got the two different squares. We got their speeds, we've just called them A and B. Here's some brightness. I'm GUI just gets slapped in here. Then we got some app state, show demo window, show another window. We've gone from camel case over here to now snake case, which again is suspicious. And then here's our main loop. Finally, we poll events, we do I'm GUI stuff. And if we scroll down a little bit, we do some angle A plus equals speed A with no regards to delta time at all. We've got some really weirdly so using a math library here would be really useful, like GLM. That way, instead of having like width, height, and two variables for everything, like the speed and also X and Y separated here as two different floats, you just have like a vec2 or a vec3 or whatever you need to use. The standard library does have some math functions, obviously, like clamp, so you don't have to use GLM clamp for something this simple, I guess, although I would always prefer to use an actual math library. Ortho height here again is wrong because it doesn't take into account the current window size, just the one that existed on application startup outside of the loop. Clear and render scene, so we have an adjusted clear color, right? So we can control the background brightness, and then we do GL clear color, renderer clear. What on earth is the difference between these two? We'll have a look at this renderer in a minute. Shader bind, texture bind, shader set uniform 4F. So the color gets set. This looks like my convention, the U underscore thing. I haven't really seen too many people do that. So maybe that's not AI. It could have obviously been generated by AI and then refined by a human. Variable names could be changed, etc. This stuff is a little bit annoying. Instead of like assigning over here, you can just have these variables be created like this, which is a lot cleaner. GLM translate is happening over here. A little bit overkill, I guess, for such a simple 2D thing, but that's okay. At least it's like a placeholder for more complex, potentially 3D transformations. Okay, render both. Oh, this is taking a turn. So we put these two models into a vector. Yeah, let's just heap allocate some memory real quick. Things were too simple, too easy, too good. Let's just introduce some unnecessary stuff. Then we're going to loop through the models. We're going to calculate a model view projection matrix by multiplying all of these together. And then we're going to set it into the shader like this, and then do render a draw, which does the draw call. I expect then we have some if and else if things for the color, so the color can change. Sure, this is fine. And then we do I'm GUI rendering both CPU kind of side and GPU side, and then swap the buffers, then we do some shutdown stuff. Okay, let's have a look at the renderer. I mean, so far, this is just a very, very bare bones OpenGL project. There's really nothing much here. It is on macOS, and I did mention at the start that was basically my entire motivation for this video. So I just clicked on this index buffer file. Like, let's have a look at this. So we've got IO stream being included in a header file that doesn't even use it. So remove this. Unsigned int is not something we use, uint32t. This is what you should be using. Same over here as well. Whenever you have data and count coming in, I like to use some sort of higher level construct over this. So you're not just taking in pointers with a count. A count is also not a size. So that's something that you need to take into account. This assert is ridiculous. Just use GL_uint in the first place. Why are we asserting this, especially at runtime? Okay, GL call is a macro that we're using over here. So that's something that I've talked about in my OpenGL series as well, which is cool. This is probably not something that AI would write, so that's nice to see. It calls GL log call, which is implemented not in the header, which is nice. It's in the CVP file. This just goes through all of the errors and prints them out using cout. Okay, that's fine. That's pretty standard. I think that generally speaking, I mean, the thing is, we're on macOS, right? So we're not using OpenGL like 4. This whole error reporting situation, right? So in older versions of OpenGL, this is the way to do it. You basically call a function. OpenGL functions do not return a result, but they sort of store an error that the function may have generated in this like global pool of errors, which you access by calling GL_getError. So every time you run an OpenGL function like this, that could have potentially resulted in an error. It's not going to tell you directly. Instead, it's going to be like, hey, you need to poll me and ask me if anything happened. So therefore, you have this little macro that you use for every single OpenGL call so that you can then automatically run this function basically every single time. Obviously, it's a macro like this so that you can then just strip it from release builds, which is not what's happening here. It's just permanently here, but obviously the way it's defined, you can just define it to be nothing, or rather define it to just be X. So you would just be like in release builds, you would just be like that so that it just runs whatever code you had in there without also doing this, because obviously this is costing you performance. In more modern OpenGL, there is something called the GL debug message callback, which everyone should be using. You can see over here that it is in OpenGL 4.3, and then we are in like 3.3, so it doesn't exist for us yet, which is very sad. Hence why, I mean, we have to sort of use this system. So this has been solved, or at least greatly improved in more modern OpenGL, but we are stuck here. Okay, so render a draw, we take in a const vertex array index buffer, and okay, vertex array, I mean, I'm curious, like very loosely how that implementation is. So we just have, yeah, it's very similar to my OpenGL series actually. So this is probably, I don't know, not AI maybe, because this just looks exactly like code that I wrote 7 years ago as part of my OpenGL series, or whenever I recorded those videos. So we do some binding, we bind the vertex array, we bind the vertex buffer, that kind of links them together. And then we set up the vertex attributes to be whatever we define inside elements, layout, get elements. Yeah, this is just like my code. So I don't know, probably not AI, but I mean, the AI could have used my code, but I doubt it. I think this is just written by following my OpenGL series, which is nice. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling slightly more optimistic about this. Instead of reviewing AI code, I'm reviewing my own code. Actually, I was probably the buffoon who wrote unsigned int back then, instead of using either GL_uint or uint32t, because I don't know. I mean, it was probably widespread by then. Maybe not. I don't know. But either way, maybe I am indeed the buffoon responsible for this stuff. Okay, so in the renderer, yeah, we bind everything, the vertex array, the shader, the index buffer, and then we do GL draw elements. That's, yeah, very, very standard, very fine. Shader, just shader compilation stuff, texture, just texture stuff, and then the vertex buffer layout, which is, yeah, from my OpenGL series. Okay, cool. That is like the entire project. The only file that I'm really quite suspicious about is this application.cpp file. Everything else I recognize from my own video series. Obviously, we're looking at some really simple code here, really basic stuff. It's a starting point. I know a lot of you are learning programming. Maybe you're getting into graphics programming or like rendering stuff for the first time, or you want to learn to build game engines. You have to start somewhere. And obviously it's great that this person has started like that. A lot of you might also be in this position. That's why I'm doing this code review in the first place. A large portion of my audience is at the beginning of their journey and I want to help them out. Obviously this is architected weirdly and wouldn't really scale to something more realistic, but the only real problem I have honestly, looking at this code, is this vector. It's just really bugging me. So before we end this code review, let me just narrow in on this simple example and show you how you should do it. So we have a model A, we have a model B. They are simply two matrices like this. We want to iterate through them, presumably just for the purpose of not duplicating this code. So we can write this code twice, and the first time we have model A, the second time we have model B. We could write a function that's called like draw model, and it would just take in like projection view, calculate the MVP inside it, take in shader and renderer and all this stuff as a parameter. Obviously it's a bit annoying. We'll be taking in a lot of parameters, even though this would usually probably exist in some sort of scene, and these things would be in some sort of mesh class, and you can re-architect it however you like, but that is the purpose of the for loop, to just not write this code twice. Also, if the list of models grows, then obviously the amount of times you duplicate the code also grows. However, the problem here is this whole memory situation. If you are a beginner in C++, I understand that the language is probably difficult and you're probably struggling, but just think about this concept of memory. Memory. That's really important. Memory. I'm making a variable. I'm making a data structure. I'm doing an operation. What's the memory doing? What's going on with that? Just keep that in mind. That's it. Just keep that in mind because it's really important. So what's happening here is I'm taking existing variables that are very nicely stored on the stack over here, and I'm putting them into a heap allocated vector just to iterate through them, which is, it kind of hurts me. I mean, I'm not the computer, but this kind of hurts me. So the interesting thing is the fix is just so easy. Just use something called an array. Use an array. You'll have to come over here. My I key on my keyboard doesn't work. It shows up like later, the actual I that I type. It's ridiculous. Someone give me a good mechanical keyboard suggestion. I've been using this thing. Honestly, I really like it. It's a Keychron. I don't know, maybe I can update the firmware and fix it, whatever. This code review is really going in a completely different direction. I don't know. I was having so many issues with this. Like sometimes keys would fire twice. I type like the letter C, two C's would show up. I updated the firmware, that kind of worked, but now suddenly, as of like yesterday, when I type the I key, it either just does not register or it comes in after I've typed the next key. So if I go like IA, it'll show up as like AI. AI. Maybe it's telling me something. Anyway, yeah, let me know in the comments below what I should do about that. So there it is. Again, I don't know why this is, let's just try and build that. Okay, the only other thing we need is the actual size, which in this case is 2. Again, we are explicitly listing this, which is why this works so well. There's actually no need for this to be dynamic. And there we go, build finished successfully. That is the only change you need. Vector to array, add a little 2 here. That's it. Now this is stored on the stack. It is copied, you know, into another place in the stack for kind of no reason. Realistically, not gonna matter at all. I mean, the vector probably isn't anyway. It's more of like a how to write code properly thing than like a this will affect your performance. In this case, that's why we like to write code properly, because it might affect performance in other cases. But anyway, if you want to be even more correct, then instead of just creating these up here, you would just create the array with the 2 models here and then use them. So again, as an example, here is my array. Here is both of my models. This, if you really wanted to address it this way, could just be model 0. The other one would just be models 1. You could also instantiate them. I think if you just do this, it will initialize all of the elements with that value, which is the same as what we were doing over here. And then the idea is on the stack, you just have both matrices side by side, one copy of them, and then that extends all the way down to you iterating over them and doing whatever work you need on them. Okay. That's it. Hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know what you thought of all of this in the comment section below. Does me doing more simple code reviews like this, does that help you? Would you like me to do more advanced stuff? Obviously, I try and kind of do both. Sometimes I'll come across simple projects on macOS like this one that might help the beginners. Sometimes there'll be more advanced projects. Realistically, it's difficult for me to cover huge code bases within a reasonably length video. But either way, as always, I'm interested in your feedback, so let me know in the comments section below. If you want to send in your project for me to take a look at, send it into chernoreview@gmail.com. That email address and some instructions will be in the description below. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.